Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and I had a subscriber ask me if I would do a video covering the pros and cons of Tren. So I decided I'm going to do a very comprehensive video on this purely for educational purposes. I want to state up front that this is a controlled substance in those countries that we're talking about here, so this is purely hypothetical. This is for research purposes, educational purposes. If you live in a country where this item is restricted, I advise you not to use it. I'm going to advise you to follow the laws of your country because I do not condone illegal activity, cannot and will not condone it on this channel. So please check the laws in your country, and again, this is for informative and educational purposes only. I really can't give you cliffs on this, guys. This is going to be a really long video. It's going to be a very comprehensive video, and it's ironic that we're going to talk a little bit about one of my other previous crafting skills, because yeah, I did used to make this substance at one time. So let me put on my +5 hat of weaponsmithing, do a little bit of crafting, and let's talk about this. And we're going to cover side effects, pros, cons, history of it. Sorry about that, guys. Try to keep this raw and unedited. And first of all, we need a little bit of history of this substance so that people understand where it came from, because there's a lot of confusion there. And when you understand where it came from, you understand some of the nature of it. All right, trenbolone, which again, a lot of different variations today. People get trenbolone acetate, trenbolone enanthate, trenbolone hex. Tren base is now out there. It is a true anabolic steroid. It is probably considered to be by many to be the perfect anabolic steroid, and we're even going to cover some potential medical uses that have been proposed for it in the modern world. It has been proposed in research as a possible TRT alternative or prescription TRT, and we're going to get to that probably near the end of this video. But yeah, it was made from nandrolone originally. Nandrolone was one of the most effective anabolics ever made by the American pharmaceutical industry. Nandrolone was originally designed to be an anabolic. It had all the muscle sparing and muscle building benefits of testosterone without the androgenic effect. So what they did, they took progesterone instead of testosterone, and they changed the structure of it to make it more anabolic. So essentially you have a much milder androgenic component than you would from testosterone, meaning it was safe for women to use in low doses, for therapeutic and medical purposes. And what we found is that nandrolone is one of the single most effective preventers of muscle wasting from people who are burn victims, who are stuck in a hospital bed, and for people who are at pretty advanced stages of full-blown AIDS. It is considered to be the single most effective muscle sparing and muscle building drug for people with AIDS that they've ever found. And that's because ultimately what they did, yes, it has less androgenic effect than testosterone, but at the muscle cell level, it's more of a SARM, meaning it has twice the androgen receptor binding in muscle tissue that testosterone does in actual muscle tissue. It doesn't always mean more gains because there's other benefits to testosterone, but there's also different side effects. But yeah, it is technically at the muscle cell level, at the receptor level, twice as anabolic. Well, what they did for trenbolone, it was decided that people wanted to research how do we make a more androgenic, more powerful version of nandrolone. So nandrolone was further modified to make it more androgenic, because you lost the androgenic effect, because they're like, well, what if we want to create super males? And I'm not sure how this idea came about when it was developed, but the structure was slightly modified to make it more androgenic. Well, what happened when that occurred, they created a substance that was more androgenic than testosterone, but on paper appeared to be 5 times as anabolic at the androgen receptor level. So literally, in theory, it should create 5 times the muscle gains as far as the IGF-1 production in the muscle cell, milligram per milligram, that testosterone does. Does it appear to do that in the real world? No, but on paper it sure adds up that way. But in my experience, does it build muscle faster? Not body weight, not pure water gain and all of that, but actual tissue weight. Yeah, it does build tissue, muscle tissue, faster than testosterone does, dramatically so. I would say probably double to triple. But trenbolone comes with a lot of side effects. It has a lot of problems. All right, where do we start? Oh, we need to discuss the other aspects of it. It also has some side effects that testosterone doesn't have. Because it is a more pure SARM-like substance in a way, it isn't affected by other enzymes. A lot of your side effects from testosterone come from the fact that it's acted on by the aromatase enzyme, which converts it into estrogen or estradiol, which again, you guys know, elevated estrogen has its own side effects: bloat, water retention, breast tissue, all of that stuff. Changes in mood. Well, trenbolone doesn't convert into estrogen at any rate. It has none, zero, zip, zilch. Also, DHT, which is created by the 5-alpha reductase, turns testosterone into that. While DHT can be anabolic in and of itself, it's no more anabolic than testosterone, but it binds to your scalp and your prostate more, so it can cause prostate hypertrophy and enlargement, and it can cause accelerated hair loss. So there are other problems associated with DHT. Well, trenbolone isn't affected by the 5-alpha reductase enzyme, so it doesn't convert to DHT either. So it tends to stay pure. It tends to stay trenbolone. And with an extreme androgen receptor binding in both the brain and the muscle tissue, it basically, as far as the brain is concerned, makes you a super male. So let's get to the first pro and con to that. Well, you have an extremely androgenic substance that binds to the brain like a super testosterone. Again, 5 times the androgen binding. Well, guys are using way more than a therapeutic dose of this, but even if they were, 5 times the androgen activity in the brain. That's going to increase confidence, but it's also going to increase aggression. And that aggression can be useful when it's applied in the gym or in training or in competition, but trenbolone is where most of your myths of roid rage come from. Most anabolics, we found that roid rage is a myth. With trenbolone, people who do not have an even temper, and again, this is a dose-dependent thing, since it increases aggression, it kind of takes away that off switch. Meaning, once you become physically aggressive on trenbolone, there's a possibility that you can't turn that switch back off that kicks in and says, you know, hey, I probably shouldn't beat this guy to death. Maybe I should stop kicking him. There's your problem. It seems to remove that off switch a little bit. And I remember another YouTuber, what was his name? Pete Rubish, talked about that quite a bit. And it removes that off switch. And what he noted too, and a lot of guys note this, and this varies from person to person, because it has such an extreme androgenic effect in the brain, pure male hormone, but super hormone, and it lowers estrogen to some extent, depending on what it's combined with, because it doesn't convert to estrogen, it reduces empathy. So for some guys, which can make relationships difficult, a lot of guys talk about that. You know, they're just less cuddly, less empathic with their girl. They're just less emotional. Combined with, again, that hyper-focus, hyper-aggression, it can interfere with relationships, but it does seem to, for some guys, reduce their level of empathy, their ability to relate to others. Can be very bad for maintaining relationships with a girl, even relationships, family relationships with your mother, sisters, because it kind of puts you into, again, hyper-masculine mode. Again, increased aggression, lack of empathy. For some people, this can be problematic if you think about it at a social level or even staying at a jail level. This is not an ideal situation, and if someone isn't even-tempered and they can't control themselves, this could very quickly turn into a problem. And again, it's dose-dependent. So, again, you look at his examples. Again, Pete Rubish, another source for this, gave you guys a lot of information on this on YouTube. The aggression and the reduced empathy can become a problem for some people. Not everybody. A lot of people tolerate it very well. We will find anyone who uses this substance notes the shorter fuse. Being stuck in traffic, road rage becomes a real issue because it can reduce patience depending on how patient a person is, and their tolerance for bullshit tends to just go down. All right, next up, Tren cough. I want to cover that one because this involves pharmacology a little bit. One of the other big side effects of this substance noted is the fact that it can cause coughing when people inject it. And someone says, well, that's not a big deal, they're not doing it often. Well, the most popular versions of it, trenbolone acetate, has lowest side effects when it's used every single day. So a lot of guys are injecting it every day, and that Tren cough can really become a problem. Now, there's two prevailing theories regarding the cause of the Tren cough. I don't know which is true. I think it's a combination. But one of the theories is that because this substance seems to, in animal studies, it increases the inflammatory prostaglandin in the body called PGF2A, which incidentally has been used in the past by bodybuilders for short periods of time. It was a drug called Litalose, was PGF2A. It was originally used to abort feedlot cattle, and basically feedlot cattle that are pregnant, to cause them to have an abortion immediately so they could continue to feed them out and put them into slaughter. Because of the inflammatory response, it causes extreme cramping. It causes the female cows to abort their baby very, very quickly. Well, it also causes intense cramping in humans also to the point of it has some bad side effects. That's one people can read up on themselves. I'm not going to cover it here, but it's an inflammatory prostaglandin called PGF2A. We know in animal studies that trenbolone increases the production of this hormone. Well, it's inflammatory in the body, and it's believed by some that the PGF2A elevation is responsible for the coughing when it's injected. If the substance is injected too near a blood vessel, some of it gets in and causes a spike in this PGF2A, which causes a large inflammatory, almost an asthma-like response, because asthma is an inflammatory response, and it causes a fit of intense, brutal coughing. Now, the other prevailing theory is that, again, when it's injected too close to a blood vessel, or some of it seeps into a blood vessel, when this substance is injected, it's the amount of solvents used. So I want to get to that for a second. It's generally believed that this substance, by people who make it, needs a large amount of solvent to dissolve, and that's for two reasons. The way we used to make it back when I was younger, I lived on a cattle ranch. My family owned a ranch, so I knew where to get the raw implants for cows. And a lot of people used to buy them. I think we used to pay approximately, back then, $33 for a 2-gram, that's 2,000 milligrams, injection cartridge made here in America. It was called Phenoplex H. It doesn't exist anymore, by the way. That's why I'm talking about this. You can't go do this now. It's impossible. You cannot find this stuff. They no longer manufacture it because they found, for a number of other reasons, it does some other stuff. But and I'll cover that. That'll jump into our next, we'll segue into our next topic with that. But we had to take these cattle implants, which contained 3 ingredients: trenbolone acetate, cellulose, and yellow dye number 5. And that's what used to give it that golden color we used to think. But apparently that's not true when people see the new raw crystals. Those are yellow also. But it created this bright yellow tablet, these injection pellets, and we would dissolve those in solvent like benzyl benzate and benzyl alcohol. We would get them really hot and then push them through a coffee filter, and the raw substance that was left was nothing but yellow dye number 5 and trenbolone acetate and whatever solvent was put in there. But it required such a large amount of solvent that the mixture to make something even close to 100 milligrams a milliliter ended up being 20 to 30% benzyl benzate, and sometimes as much as 5% alcohol, which then had to be baked out, which made it even bright orange substance when people were left with it. And that's why all the early Tren was just almost looked like orange peel, orange in the vial once it was sterilized and mixed with oils and everything. But that's how we used to make it. Well, you have an enormous amount of solvent in there. Well, you inject that in your bloodstream, it's the solvent causing the coughing. Well, people still get that today to some extent, and a lot of it is because a lot of manufacturers, when they make this substance, they tend to think still in those terms. It seems to dissolve slow in solvent, so they still run a lot of times like a mixture of 20% benzyl benzate, well, just trying to dissolve it so that they can suspend it, so they end up with a mixture that's less than 80% of their actual sterile pharmaceutical grade oil, cottonseed oil or grapeseed oil, whatever they happen to be using, and they end up with at least 20% benzyl benzate. Well, that could, in theory, still cause this problem. And in my experience, from way in the past, so that there's no statute of limitations here to worry about, and this is from before that, so if anyone's watching, yeah, we're talking more than 5 years ago. So the statute of limitations on manufacturing anabolics is 5 years in the United States per federal law. So I found that this substance could be dissolved at 10% benzyl benzate with 2% benzyl alcohol, and that's for sterility. if it's put through a water bath. A hot water bath will let it dissolve within 15 to 20 minutes. Again, using a hot water bath with all the beakers and everything, allowed it to be dissolved, and it will stay suspended with 10%. Well, that 10% is more normalized. That's closer to what pharmaceutical grade testosterone and stuff are at that you get for your prescription. But as long as the substance is kept at no more than 75 to 100 milligrams per milliliter, it will totally suspend at that. Now, where were we going with that? Where were we going? Something about the PGF2A. Yeah, PGF2A is noted for causing cell death of fat cells also, by the way. It is a prominent fat killer. It doesn't burn body fat, it actually kills fat cells. Well, trenbolone seems to burn body fat, but it also has some other inflammatory responses, and we'll get to that in a minute. Let's cover the other one, Trensomnia, which again, that seems to be caused by the PGF2A. Because it's an inflammatory thing, a lot of people on trenbolone, and this is dose dependent, they have to find a comfortable dose because it causes insomnia. Now, a lot of guys are like, wow, you know, insomnia is bad for your gains. Yeah, it is. But insomnia is good for fat loss because you're active and moving and fidgeting in bed. But yeah, it causes night sweats and it causes insomnia, and that contributes to the fat loss too. We'll get to that in a minute. But yeah, insomnia from the inflammatory response in there. It makes it difficult for people to sleep, and they twitch it, and they'll twitch it and everything in bed. Again, that burns through a lot of calories and less sleep, meaning you're active, you're burning through more calories instead of recovering and resting and everything. So it does cause insomnia, but that's dose dependent, and in my experience, the insomnia caused by this substance can generally be controlled by a combination of Benadryl and melatonin to again counter that inflammatory response, keeping people awake. However, there's going to be a dose where no person of this substance can get a full night's sleep. So it's going to depend on the individual. There is no set substance. Some people can't handle more than 30 milligrams a day. Some people no more than 100. But I'll put it to you this way. A lot of guys who are claiming to use very high doses of this substance and being able to tolerate it are getting underdosed or fake stuff on the black market. Because again, ultimately, this is a black market drug. So people who are talking about, oh, I use 150 milligrams a day, I question the legitness of their product. Because a lot of guys, and as someone who's made it myself and know for a fact what the purity of the substance is in the past, I would say that for me, the maximum dose that will allow me to sleep, even with using melatonin and stuff, is maybe 50 milligrams. Anything above that, I wouldn't be sleeping more than 3-4 hours a night tops. Just impossible. And again, lack of sleep, not a good thing for your progress. Although I guess it will burn body fat faster. So, body fat and night sweats, they go hand in hand here. All right, a lot of people don't understand with this substance. One of the things you'll note is that it burns fat. It burns body fat decently well, even on its own, sometimes without a calorie deficit. And it's really interesting with that because it actually lowers your metabolism. That's something people don't realize. Trenbolone has been shown in various animal studies to reduce T3, so it reduces thyroid hormones. Your metabolism actually goes down on it, yet it seems to burn body fat. Well, one of the things they've noted that's characteristic of what this substance does, it was used for a long time in animals and feedlot cattle. They gave them one implant 6 weeks before slaughter, and the animals usually gained 100 pounds of lean muscle with no extra food. It increases feed efficiency. It increases nutrient absorption and utilization in the body while lowering metabolism and while burning body fat. So what ends up happening in cattle, again, given to female cattle, it puts 100 pounds of lean muscle on them in 6 weeks without increasing their food. So, a 600-pound cow will go up to 700 pounds, giving her the exact same food, whether it's a steer or a feedlot heifer, because you don't eat bulls. A lot of people don't know that. You don't eat bulls. So you eat heifers and steers. But yeah, they gain 100 pounds of muscle without extra food. It seems to impact the calories in and out because it seems to increase calories in while reducing calories out, but they don't gain any body fat. And again, what we've noted, that's the reason it's illegal. That was the other point I was going to cover. That is the reason it's no longer manufactured. So you can't legally get in the United States a pure trenbolone acetate anymore. Because all the pellets now, what they found is that because it tends to just peel off body fat, the animals get too lean. You don't get the marbling people want. They get a really lean animal, which isn't good for profits always. What they found is that they will gain body fat normally, or at least gain a little bit of marbling on it, if they add estrogen to it, or estradiol. So all the modern stuff that you buy is 10 to 20% estradiol. The rest is trenbolone. So if people try to use this substance today, it's not going to be pretty. So the modern pellets can't be utilized by people who want to make their own substance anymore, which is why it's okay to bring that up. The stuff doesn't exist, it's pure. Now it all has estrogen, so if you take it, it's going to give you gyno, it's going to give you some serious problems. Your estrogen is going to be higher than a female's if you were to utilize this. So what that did, that stopped the fat burning effect. And it's because some of the fat burning with it is that this substance seems to cause repartitioning, because it slows metabolism. It tends to send everything that you eat to your muscle tissue, meaning it tends to cause the muscle tissue to attract all of the food. It completely inhibits de novo lipogenesis in animals as long as the estrogen is kept low down at normal male levels. In animal studies, mice, rats, and cattle so far, it completely stops de novo lipogenesis, which is a conversion of carbs into fat. Completely stops it. And it's important to note that in mice and rats, de novo lipogenesis is easily 5 to 10 times higher than in humans anyways, but in rodent studies, this substance drops it to 0. Combine that with the nutrient partitioning, it tends to pull nutrients back towards muscle tissue. Again, the muscles tend to attract and soak up food. It increases their insulin sensitivity, so the fat cells just get less food. So people tend to just gain pure muscle weight on this. And the PGF2A kills fat cells. Well, it does increase the production of PGF2A, so in theory, trenbolone might actually be causing a small amount of cell death of fat tissue, which is probably would explain why people sometimes gain weight on it while losing a little bit of body fat, even if they're overeating. But the thing is, a lot of guys note that weight gain on trenbolone happens even if they're at their maintenance calories. And that's the tricky thing. That's the weird thing. And that's the thing that throws a lot of guys off. They'll go on this substance and they're at their maintenance calories. It might be their 3,500. They've been sitting at 200 pounds at 3,500 calories for 3 months. They continue to eat 3,500 calories and they gain 10 pounds. Because again, it increases feed efficiency while reducing thyroid output. And it's the reduced thyroid output because thyroid hormones are very catabolic to muscle tissue. And it's noted that when people go on a restricted diet on this substance, one of the things that they note is that they tend to gain muscle while losing fat. It preserves muscle tissue not only because it's extremely anabolic, but because it reduces thyroid output. And again, an interesting point. People with hyperactive thyroid struggle to gain muscle tissue. And it slows thyroid down. So people tend to hold on to muscle tissue and even gain muscle tissue while losing weight. But what it also does, this substance, people at maintenance calories actually usually start gaining muscle weight without increasing their calories. Just an important side note. But the other thing to note, a lot of guys do find because of the nutrient partitioning, it causes supercompensation of glycogen stores. So people who don't drink sufficient water intake on this tend to have a lot of muscle cramping. A lot of muscle cramping. Now I want to go over to some of the other side effects of it, because we've covered a lot of the pros with just some of the cons of it. But we've only covered the psychological cons. What are the actual physiological? Well, obviously, the mood thing is important. That's enormous. The increase in aggression is an enormous one. The lack of sleep and the night sweats are a big one. Now, why does it cause night sweats? Well, it's because this substance, what it found is that since it doesn't allow any de novo lipogenesis in the body, it has to do something with all those carb calories. It tends to shuttle all of the carbs into muscle tissue. Well, what ends up happening when those glycogen stores start getting full, the body will continue to pull carbohydrates into muscle tissue. and that increases body temperature. It can increase body temperature a lot. In fact, one of the things you'll note, a lot of guys who every time they eat a carbohydrate meal, a meal with carbs or protein in it, any significant amount, they start sweating. It can be middle of winter sometimes, and people on this will start sweating. They'll get hot. Their body temperature's hot. They run warmer, even though their thyroid's lower. And it's because it's burning off extra glucose and glycogen in the mitochondria of the muscle cells as body heat. So that's what causes the night sweats tremendously. And if you combine that with the insomnia, it can really intensify and make the insomnia worse for people who utilize it. So sweating, insomnia, mood. Another big one, what was it going to cover? Oh, the PGF2A. It's inflammatory. One of the characteristics you'll note of almost all trenbolone users who use any significant amount, if you can get near enough to them to hear them breathing, you're going to notice a lot of YouTubers, depending on if they have a high quality mic near their face or not, they breathe heavier. Their breathing is labored. Well, this is caused partially because of the body weight. I mean, anyone who's well over 200 pounds is going to need more oxygen. They're going to breathe deeper. You combine that with the elevated PGF2A level that's inflammatory, it can have a mild asthma-like effect. It can also cause sleep apnea. Again, you see where we're going here. Sleep is becoming a really big problem on this substance. A lot of guys who use it need to go on a CPAP. Just because, again, it can increase sleep apnea, but it causes labored breathing. So people who use this substance who are at a higher body weight, they tend to breathe really deep. You can hear it. And it's definitely noticeable. Again, watch the various YouTubers, watch to see how labored their breathing is, a lot of the bigger muscular guys, and that will tell you a lot right there. So breathing can become a problem on it. So again, we're talking about some pretty serious side effects at this point. None of these are immediately dangerous to health, but they are problematic. So you've got the labored breathing, which again even contributes to sleep apnea, which again, now sleep apnea is life-threatening. Sleep apnea can kill you. And a lot of anabolics have been noted to have increased chances of sleep apnea, particularly due to body weight gain, but sleep apnea can be dangerous. So a lot of guys, again, who are heavy Tren users need to go on a CPAP just to control that. And that also can help them with their insomnia a little bit. A little melatonin, a little Benadryl, CPAP machine. They're usually good to go. But you're talking about a lot of work to deal with these sides. Which again, the actual potential life-threatening side effect though, this substance has been noted to absolutely destroy your good cholesterol, your HDL cholesterol. And now we're getting to something that's a problem. Because HDL cholesterol is preventative of heart attacks and cardiovascular disease. It's your good cholesterol. It's what clears all the gunk out of your arteries and clears all of that out so that your body can remetabolize it. It can help with stopping the buildup of those artery linings. Right? It's a good thing. In fact, when you pull people's blood work, the best determiner of if they're at risk of a heart attack is to look at their HDL to triglyceride ratios. Low HDL with high triglycerides, dangerous, bad. So anyone who's using this substance has to pay attention to their HDL cholesterol. They can do certain things like take certain serums to help. Red wine before bed. Trying to eat good fats. Again, a little fish oil, stuff like that. Those things can all help, but ultimately none of that's going to completely reverse it. Anyone who uses this substance at any sort of moderate to heavy dose for long periods of time is going to see their HDL cholesterol go down. That does put you at risk of heart attack in the long term. So that's one of the serious ones, something that has to be factored in. So again, you combine that with the increased inflammatory response, labored breathing, potential sleep apnea, low HDL cholesterol. Yeah, you're talking about a substance that isn't low risk anymore. And again, this is why this substance has to be carefully used. And it is so heavily abused by so many young men today. I see a lot of young men who are using 100 milligrams of this stuff a day because it's so powerful. I mean, it is so powerful. But that does come at a price, and that's something that people need to factor in. The risk for cardiovascular disease from this drug is very real, particularly when it's abused. Now, what about therapeutic use? It doesn't seem to cause these things. In fact, there have been several rodent studies done to test the idea of using this substance for male TRT, and I've seen some articles and journals written on it that were amazing. I don't have them handy right now. I might try to find them later. But what has been noted, most importantly, normally TRT has its own risk of side effects, and mostly their risk to prostate. It seems to lower a lot of things. It lowers heart attack risk, lowers stroke risk, even reduces body fat gain. But it does pose a risk to your prostate and to your scalp for those who care about baldness. But baldness is not considered to be a health risk. Prostate health is. However, it's noted in the mice and rats that if they don't exceed therapeutic doses, meaning we're talking about the equivalent of 100 milligrams or less a week of this substance in a male. So even TRT usually ranges about 100 to 150 milligrams per week. They don't go over the equivalent of 100 milligrams. They don't see any prostate hypertrophy at all. Now, when it goes much higher than that, when they start going into supraphysiological doses of Tren in these studies, the rodents noted prostate hypertrophy. It's still less than with testosterone at those doses, but it starts happening. But what they noted at low enough doses, it actually seemed to reverse a little bit, meaning you saw any prostate hypertrophy that was there, some of it reversed the other direction. And why? Because there's no DHT in the body at that point. So that made this a really interesting substance to use because it lowers DHT. If it's the only hormone in the body, you can drop DHT to nearly zero. Drops it to nearly zero. So again, that made it valuable, and they wanted to look at it because normally estrogen goes down on it also, and that was a concern. The estrogen dropped to nearly dangerously low levels sometimes in these studies, but they noted some of the negative benefits of that didn't occur. What we found is that in animal studies with trenbolone, it causes bone mineralization on its own. Normally, if estrogen goes too low, it can contribute to osteoporosis. It can contribute to bone weakness. But the trenbolone itself seems to be anabolic to bone tissue. So it seems to offset that. So you have a substance that might be, and this is going to be looked at further, other scientists are trying to look at this, it might be a superior TRT substance. As a totally synthetic substance not found in the body, it might be better than testosterone for testosterone replacement therapy because men gain a little more muscle, they lose a little more fat, less prostate hypertrophy, and just as good a bone mineralization. So there's something that's going to be looked at a lot more in the future. Now, before I close this out, I forgot a whole other point, so I'll cover this at the end, and anyone who really wants to know about this substance will listen. Sexual side effects. Sexual side effects. People talk about Tren dick, and what people don't realize, Tren dick is usually the inability to orgasm. This doesn't cause what people always call deca dick, where you can't get an erection. It causes oftentimes the inability to have an orgasm sometimes, or delay it longer, which might sound like a good thing, but if you already have any issues with this at all, this might be a bad thing because it can inhibit how quickly you get there, and your partner might get tired and worn out. Just a factor to consider. Why does this happen? Well, a lot of guys always think about progesterone, and it's really funny because this is people who don't understand the chemistry. They'll say, well, because it's made from progesterone, it cross-binds the progesterone receptor, and that causes deca dick and everything else. That's actually not true. Progesterone, first of all, doesn't cause impotence. Progesterone in men, when it's taken synthetically, increases sex drive. It increases sex performance. Progesterone is actually a sexual performance booster. So that's, again, a total myth. And you know what? It doesn't actually cross-bind to progesterone receptors at a high rate. It's at a really, really low rate. We're talking about like 1%. So to see any significant increase in progesterone activity, people would need to be on a high dose. Well, a lot of guys use a high dose. So what's going on here? Well, the truth is it actually increases sex drive. It increases sex drive a lot, particularly when combined with even a modest amount of testosterone, which we'll get to the next set of side effects on that. So again, guys, the longer I do this video, the more I realize there's more side effects we need to cover. But what actually happens, you have a substance that increases sex drive. It's a superandrogen. Increases drive to some extent, depending on the individual. You combine that with the fact that it can elevate prolactin levels, not progesterone. This is where we get mixed up. Prolactin is the substance that women produce, of course, in large quantities to help stimulate milk production, but men also produce prolactin. Do you know when we produce it? After we orgasm. So it causes the refractory period to where sometimes you lose your erection, and it could cause that in some cases. But what it also does, prolactin lets you know that you're done having sex in men. Therefore, you don't need to orgasm again. So the elevated prolactin levels combined with the increased androgen activity increases sex drive, but reduces the ability to have an orgasm. So when people talk about this side effect Tren dick of just keep going and going and going 30 minutes an hour sometimes, that's what they're talking about. It's the increased androgen making you want to have sex, but the other hormone saying you don't need to orgasm, you've already orgasmed. So it sends a mixed signal to the brain. So, again, while that can sound like a lot of fun, not always all it's cracked up to be. Lastly, the thing that we need to cover, the last final side effect, is that, and this needs to be countered by people thinking about very carefully what they would stack with this, because trenbolone has an extreme androgen receptor binding affinity, 5 times that of testosterone. Well, if there's any trenbolone in the body, that means it's hogging up the receptors. And when we talk about affinity, when we compare affinities of different substances, when we mix them in the body in studies, we look to see how if they push the other one off the receptor. Meaning trenbolone pushes other androgens out of the receptor as they're trying to bind. It just says, nope, you're not getting in that hole, pushes it out, and it takes it itself. What that tends to do is it leaves larger amounts of any other substance that you're taking, whether it's trenbolone, nandrolone, winstrol, whatever it is that a person's taking. It leaves more of it circulating in the bloodstream a little longer before it lets it bind, because the trenbolone is greedy and it says, that's my receptor, I'm taking it, and it pushes it off. So, what does that mean for side effects? Well, the trenbolone itself only has the side effects we've listed. It tends to elevate the side effects of anything else taken with it. Meaning, if it's taken with testosterone, testosterone tends to be left floating in the bloodstream. And if someone's taking an amount of testosterone that would cause estrogenic or DHT side effects, the trenbolone will accelerate those effects. Meaning, they're going to be slightly worse than if the Tren wasn't there. And again, it's because they're left floating in the bloodstream. It leaves more time for them to be acted upon by things like the aromatase and the 5-alpha reductase enzyme. Well, what that means is that a corresponding amount of testosterone that would only produce a very mild side effect in one person, if they add trenbolone to the mix, it's going to possibly double the side effects. So the solution to that is that people who use it, what a lot of people have found over the years, and I've seen forums like the GH15 forum advocates this, a lot of Eastern European lifters advocate this, keeping all other substances in the body limited to somewhere between 100 and 300 milligrams total, while combined with trenbolone. And they use trenbolone as the primary substance because at the end of the day, there's no reason other than psychological or joint benefits or whatever, something that lubricates the joints like nandrolone or something. There's very little reason to stack any other substance with trenbolone other than the trenbolone side effects. Meaning they can always add more trenbolone to get more muscle, more strength, more aggression, more drive, more fat burning. The trenbolone does better than all the other substances at that. So the only reason some people add certain things in is to balance their mood, like a low dose of testosterone. Or they'll run something else mild with it because they say, okay, I can't handle more than 50 milligrams of this drug a day, but I want more gains than 50 milligrams gives. They'll add a milder substance on top of it, like Boldenon or Masteron or something else that doesn't increase the side effects further. Low side effect substances combined with it to give a further anabolic effect or fat burning effect or whatever that it is they're trying to achieve. And that's the reason people stack stuff with it at all, is because the Tren itself, they can only handle so much of it and they want more gains than it gives, which kind of gets crazy to a certain point because you got to ask how much more gains do you want than what trenbolone gives. Again, it depends on people's goals. But that is generally accepted to be true, although in the modern lifting world, a lot of serious athletes ignore that. I know of at least a couple of top-level lifters who just stack huge amounts of other stuff with their Tren because at the end of the day, they don't care about the side effects. They're like, I don't care if these side effects are terrible. Me winning a world record is more important than me getting my sleep or me keeping my blood pressure in check. So they just don't care at a certain point. But for anyone who wants a quality of life, it's generally been found that if trenbolone is used, it works best if it is the dominant substance in the body and very, very little else is used with it, because it will elevate the side effects of those other substances. Again, up to a point to where the trenbolone side effects itself can even be managed. So that pretty much covers it. Alright guys, hopefully you guys have a better understanding of the substances, the pros and cons of it, the risks of it, the problems with it, the health risks, the benefits of it, and why people choose to use this substance and why it is called by many the golden nectar of the gods. Alright guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.